right, everyone. Welcome to our TWE Solutions Modern Workforce Management session. We're really excited to have you here. I'd like to get started with introducing everybody to who's on the call. I have John Mercado, the CTO and co-founder of Bacon Unlimited. Welcome, John.
Hello. Hi, everybody.
As well as Dave Adekoya, our senior engineer and development operation wizard. Welcome, Dave.
Hello.
You're going to be the lucky ones presenting for us today. And I'm Marla Gutierrez, one of the account managers from TWE Solutions. I'd like to start by thanking you all for attending. Like I said, we're really excited to show you the presentation today. TWE and Bacon Unlimited are presenting this approach to managing the modern workforce. We will cover how a superior endpoint management solution like Bacon Unlimited is a great complement to your identity management platforms, such as Azure AD or Jumpcloud. Pairing these solutions together allows for automated rollout of new users and devices from anywhere. Please note the agenda on the screen. In summary, we're going to cover the modern workforce and how we deal with identity management and device management. But before getting started, we'd love to hear from you, so definitely add questions to the chat box. We have people behind the scenes answering your questions. We want to keep this as interactive as possible and to get to any additional questions during the demo. Also, be ready for some post-event surveys. We really care about your feedback and thoughts of our presentation. This helps us grow and get better, so we definitely look forward to hearing from you. And as a thank you for attending, we are sending out some nice TWE t-shirts to everybody who is participating, so make sure you include the address of preference to have this shipped to you. And for those of you who make it to the end, we'll be doing a raffle for an Oculus headset sponsored by TWE. Now, before John gets started, I think it'd be a good idea to launch a couple of poll questions to help tailor our content. Emily, can you launch a poll for us, please?
All right, and the polls are open. Let's see, so far, people managing remote here. Let's see what it says. Looks like the majority are sort of 50% of their staff are more than 50 remote, at least some of the time. Quarter of you, 100% of the time. So yeah, not surprised to hear that. I think with COVID, that's a pretty common thing. Emily, would you mind launching one more poll before we get started? And Emily, would you mind reading that one off too, just so everybody hears it as well?
Did you or do you currently use Microsoft Endpoint Management tools or Jumpcloud in your environment? Yes, heavily, yes, somewhat, or no, not at all.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. A little bit surprising number there. 70%, 71% do not actually use Microsoft or Jumpcloud, which I think is kind of fascinating because we see such a huge amount of companies using, well, in more often than not, Microsoft. A lot of people who use G Suite, sometimes use Jumpcloud to take care of some of the other aspects of identity management and permissioning and control. So things like Radius and stuff. So we'll get into that a little bit. But this might be interesting for some people. Maybe you're considering getting those things or how those things fit in together. So we'll definitely be covering that today as we kind of go through. So I don't know why the presenter mode continues to go off on my PowerPoint here, but I'll try one more time to make it stick. Let's see what happens. So TWE and Bacon Unlimited are co-broadcasting this today. Bacon Unlimited was started by those of us at TWE some years ago, and now is its own org. And TWE is a full-service IT consultancy focusing on value-added resale of sort of complex equipment and managed services and projects and things like that. So we focus on everything from networking and security, Microsoft Cloud, AWS Cloud, Office 365, and a lot of things that are sort of associated with that. And of course, our toolkit in our managed service portfolio which includes Bacon and several other tools. So with that, we'll kind of get started going through the concepts here. And again, this is kind of a working session, so David and I are going to be having some conversation back and forth on some of the concepts. Then I'm going to be showing you the actual portals of those tools mentioned, so Azure AD and what used to be called Intune is now called Endpoint Manager from Microsoft. We'll be talking about JumpCloud, which has similar capabilities to Azure AD and Endpoint Manager combined, and then sort of how Bacon Unlimited is the really effective part of the endpoint management that those other tools kind of require to really help people do their job in a very full way. So with that, just a quick background on identity management. I think a lot of people listening in today may know some of these things, but there was not always LDAP and other directory services. Way back in the old days, there was something called X500, and people needed something more lightweight and simpler. And so LDAP, which is actually lightweight is the first word in there, Directory Access Protocol, was designed to be a really easy thing to use and actually became the industry standard. So most people know that if they use any Microsoft as Active Directory, which is effectively an LDAP-based tool, allows you to keep your usernames and passwords and other information stored in that directory service, authenticate things, connect people to domains, all sorts of fun things. And not everybody uses it. Some people actually use things like OpenLDAP or other versions of LDAP, but LDAP has kind of dominated identity for the last 20-something years. And I think the key thing is that that's really changing at a very fast clip, greatly influenced by the cloud and all of the capabilities that are possible there. So we've got something called cloud only, or sometimes say born in the cloud, type identity or authentication. And that's when you start seeing things, everything from Azure AD, Okta, JumpCloud. There are others, one identity, I think this is what it's called. And basically, in order to get this cloud-based authentication, there are a lot of technical roadblocks, and so we'll get into kind of what that takes. And a lot of people aren't ready to switch to that, or only partially, and so we see those hybridized as well. So a lot going on in identity management, and it's really changing at a fast pace right now. And I think everybody who works in IT really needs to keep up on that because there's just so much change happening. So as mentioned, traditional products, Active Directory, OpenLDAP, there are some others, but those are the main ones. Modern stuff like Azure AD, JumpCloud, and Okta, things like that are becoming very, very prevalent. And there are, lesser known sort of things that you can do as well. So essentially, we want to talk about what the differences are and when you should use both, and kind of what the benefit happens to be. So we'll get into that.
Yes, on that note, you can see that JumpCloud offers a lot of the same traditional identity technologies like Radius and LDAP. How does Microsoft Azure measure up in those areas?
So that's a sort of a good focus area, right? Which is what are all the little pieces, and we put it in parentheses here, but the SAML 2.0 capabilities really allow for single sign-on and essentially cloud-facing or internet-facing authentication, right? So you can have devices that are anywhere, and they can be a part of essentially a secure platform by essentially trading authentication tokens through sort of a certificate-based pass-through. So when we do that, essentially we set up a system where things don't have to go over like a VPN or some sort of other conduit to be able to connect. And that means people can work from home, people can be, at Starbucks, they can be, on the road in hotels or any remote office. And you don't really have to think about how they're connecting, just that they are connected. But there's other technologies, right, that we've been using for years, Dave, right, like Radius, is something that people often use when they're authenticating, doing sort of network-based authentication like through Wi-Fi, and they wanted to use the same authentication as something like Active Directory, and they connect all that together. And I think one of the things JumpCloud has that's kind of a cool advantage is it can do all the things that Azure AD can do with sort of the SAML 2.0, but it doesn't require another product to be able to do Radius and the multi-factor authentication and things like that. And actually Azure AD can do multi-factor authentication, but what it doesn't have is actually built-in LDAP or LDAP-S or Radius. And so if you want to do those things, you'll actually have to run some servers. If you want to use the Microsoft technologies like Radius, you'd have to do through what's called NPS, which runs on Windows Server, and Active Directory for LDAP or LDAP-S. And there are a lot of challenges and things that kind of come with doing that. So JumpCloud, I think, has made a nice market for themselves, particularly for people who don't want to be too dependent on Microsoft, or maybe use something like G Suite instead of Office 365 as an alternative to do identity and authentication. Probably my only warning about that is they do offer everything as an additional sort of pay step, so everything's kind of an extra cost for each feature that you want, but it is nicely integrated into the console, which we'll get into here shortly, and I'll show you what it actually looks like. It's pretty nicely laid out. I think because there's so much security risk in hosting a service like this, and it requires so much capability, you do see that a lot of companies use third-party services, I mean, most companies want to use, the cloud-based service like Azure AD or Okta, and instead of self-hosting.
So just a little bit ago, you actually mentioned companies that aren't ready to switch. So for those businesses, what's the lift to keep all the infrastructure in your own data center?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you want to build this yourself, certainly with Microsoft, you would need to use federated services. So if anybody's ever had the extreme pleasure of using ADFS, you know that it is a lot of work to keep it working properly. And then if you want to build resilience in that, if your workforce is distributed, or even if it's not, and you just want to, failover between, say, two data center locations, there's just a lot of infrastructure that you have to maintain, a lot of Windows servers that have to be patched and maintained. So it's not that you can't do it. If you want to get SAML 2.0, ADFS can do that, multi-factor authentication and the like. But I think that the challenge comes into if you look at the cost of some of the services that are out there, is it going to be really worth it? The infrastructure that Microsoft builds and that JumpCloud builds and Okta builds is so large and distributed around the world with all kinds of fail-safes and capabilities. It's kind of hard to make a case to manage all of that internally. You can do it, and if it's something that's really important to your business, it's certainly possible, but we've seen most people move away from that, and I think that that's probably wise. So, these cloud identity platforms, it is, security and convenience combination, right? So when somebody makes it really easy for you to log in through maybe a single sign-on portal to all of your apps, and those apps essentially are bound through the SAML 2.0 technology, and then it's, two factors you want to get into those things, not only are you more secure because your end users aren't having a challenge, right? It's not hard for them to take part in this. A simple training can show somebody how to log into their centralized portal, see all of their apps in one place, at least for all the cloud-based apps. And a lot of on-prem are switching to that as well, with what we would call sort of SAML 2.0 support. But the ability to do all of those things and have a push notification come to your phone and say, hey, is this really you logging in for two-factor? That's really powerful. The other thing, and I'll give Microsoft the tip of the cap here, is they've really enhanced their security insofar as they pick up on a lot of bad behavior where people are trying to impersonate you logging in from overseas, or things changing in Office 365 where all of a sudden someone has permissions over a user account or a mailbox and you get a notification about that. So maybe it was on purpose, but if it wasn't, you kind of know that it's going on or that accounts have been broken into. So I do think a lot of those kinds of capabilities would be very, very challenging to build on one's own. And also, if you really want end users to adhere to good security, you just have to make it easy for them. So cloud identity management certainly can be equated with sort of a heightened level of security and convenience. It is going to cost more than what we all sort of paid for say, Active Directory in 2005, something like that. But there's a lot more capability that you're going to get out of it. I think most companies that we have engaged with feel like they're pretty glad that they're doing that as opposed to staying on it. And again, not saying one particular flavor is better than another. I think for some people, Okta is really the right choice. Some people JumpCloud, some people Azure AD, and some people it's actually a combination. I've got one customer now doing JumpCloud and Okta together because each one sort of offers a different feature that's really beneficial for them. So these are all kind of the reasons that we're seeing people move this way, and it ties into kind of this next part, which is remote management. And so this is the part where the rubber kind of hits the road, and I think based on our survey response, not everybody is using sort of like an MDM, at least not from Microsoft or JumpCloud. But mobile device management is kind of an interesting area, and I think that kind of talking about where it fits is really important, and also what its limitations are. So as an example, the Intune product, right? It can do a lot of great things. It can provision basic pieces of software, like a good endpoint management software, in our case, Vacant Unlimited, and JumpCloud can do the same. But when you start going, well, why do I need the endpoint management product? I could just use the MDM and it does a lot of the same things. Well, that's kind of where we get into some problems, and I'll be showing some slides coming up that kind of the little Venn diagram that kind of shows all the limitations there. But just think, the speed at which they can do things, the feedback that they give when they're doing them, and then the capabilities themselves, kind of where the limits are. So really what we find is if you're going to do this kind of new cloud-based identity so that you have all of this mobility for your end users, the ability to work from home, the ability to move around and have it always sort of checking in and doing the right things, you're also going to need to come up with a strategy to remotely manage and provision systems. And that's something that we've really kind of mastered in the Vacant Unlimited company, which is, how do we get it out there? How do we get people online? How can people receive a laptop that was shipped directly from the manufacturer, open it up, put in the credentials they received maybe through like an encrypted email, and then have the system self-assemble from there, right? An old colleague of mine, Glenn from Boston, used to use that term, self-assembled. I've always loved that because that's what we all want in IT, right? We want to be able to self-assemble systems, have them essentially completely get built the way we want them to without a huge amount of our IT department's time. And so the modern tools can really help you do that. Some of the traditional tools, there's I think a lot more work that goes into them. So just to give you a few examples, I tried not to pick on people that are not deserving of it these days. So SCCM, which is the Microsoft Configuration Manager, is a platform started in 1994 and it's been sort of maintained and upgraded and renamed a few times over the years. But ultimately, SCCM is a one you may have heard of or maybe using. It does take a lot of time to configure and master, and so there ends up sort of usually being an SCCM wizard in every office that uses it, if they get it off the ground at all. And then it's really hard, I think, for everyone else to participate in it at the same level. And it was designed originally for LAN, so it's not really great when people are remote. LANdesk and Altiris are two other old tools. I think Altiris isn't even being developed anymore, and LANdesk was sold off as part of another company. So, those kinds of tools to get sort of basic functions, patching, installing software, inventory management, policy management done, it's really challenging. So what we've seen is a nice combination between MDM and endpoint management, or just endpoint management is usually what's helping people today. Bacon is obviously a very, very new tool, just the last 4 years in real heavy development. And it can do, more than most of those other tools by a long shot, and you can learn in one day. So that's really helpful. Intune and JumpCloud on the MDM side, they offer really good value if you have to manage phones and like iPads and other tablets. And then they can also do some very basic functions on workstations, like rollout Bacon as an example, that can be really handy, and just as an auto enrollment function. So we're going to talk a little bit through that today, and how these products work. And Dave, I thought maybe I'd call on you too, because not for one of the tools that's on the screen right now, but I know you work for a slightly more modern management tool. I can't remember when it was developed, but maybe you can, you don't have to name it, but maybe talk what the experience is like of using that management tool versus using Bacon, and kind of why we're doing things the way we're doing things.
Yeah, sure. So one thing to keep in mind here is that these tools were made, in the 90s, the early 2000s, and they can quickly fall out of touch. So what we kind of saw is that the security landscape has evolved, right? Like the modern security calls for a lot more than it used to, as well as standard coding practices have improved a lot since a lot of these tools were created. And one of the biggest pain points we see, though, is that they have a very rigid design philosophy, and that makes it difficult for them to adapt to the changing needs of MSPs, especially now, right? I mean, even the tool I used to work with kind of fell into these same traps. So kind of the key thing here to take home with you is that Bacon is made for IT people with a lot of that flexibility in mind, so you can use it to adjust the needs of your business.
Cool. Yeah, I think, big corporations, small companies, MSPs, all of those people really need tools that are adaptive, and that can get new features quickly, right? Even if they don't exist at this moment. And one of the things I've enjoyed about the Bacon's development, I think, is the ability to work around problems, even if the feature isn't, fully fleshed out yet in some cases. And we've seen a lot of people be able to bring things to the table that 4 months later was now in the product as a full feature, right? But something maybe we did with scripting or YAML interpretation or something like that. So some really cool things that we can do there. And I know you've had a lot of experience with these tools, both at a company where you worked, but also with tools that you didn't have a hand in making. And I think we're always glad to have someone like you on board, kind of giving your feedback, just like a lot of our clients do. I did promise to show this Venn diagram. So what does MDM offer? Essentially, you can see in the middle here in the purple section, software policies, basic configuration policies, software inventory, and hardware inventory. You're going to see all of those in Intune. What you're not going to see is the ability to do things in real time. It has a setting for a 60-minute is the shortest time that Intune can do anything. It doesn't give a tremendous amount of feedback, and that can be really challenging, because if you're trying to do something like install a piece of software, if it has any complexity to it or a script or something, there's no iterative turnaround. You can't hit the go now button in any easy way and then have it say, oh, you're almost there, but you forgot to put in this flag, or this particular version is the wrong one for that particular endpoint, or whatever. So there's not really good monitoring there. There's not really real good active real-time activity. So that can be challenging. I think if you're just doing basic phones and tablets, and you just need to be able to do a remote lock or wipe, or get someone online and make sure that you've assigned it to the right person, it's going to be really good for that. Bacon, on the other hand, can do all of those things. It also supports Linux and Mac in a very full way. No Linux on Intune, and only sort of basic Mac things. And then there's just a lot of like instant install and scripting functions and patching controls that you're going to get something in something like Bacon. So what is great, about Intune is phones and tablets. They have that. Bacon has no short-term intent on doing that. It's a sort of a simple function. There's a lot of tools out there for it. So we're always keeping it in the background, but as of now, the only sort of MDM functions we'll be doing would be for the Mac OS system itself. I think those are kind of the key points. Any other thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, actually, yeah, now that you mention it. So Intune's been around for 12 years or so. Is there a fundamental reason why it has such a limited feature set in comparison to Bacon?
That's a good point. So architecturally, right, it wasn't really designed with the idea of being a full system management real-time solution. I think when they made it, they saw that there were some challenges with people having things remote, but they saw remote as kind of a temporary function, right? Like somebody left the office and we kind of want to be able to make sure we could still deploy a piece of software, but they'll be back and they'll have SCCM and other monitoring tools when they connect to the network, right, over VPN or by physically being there. And I think one of the interesting things about that is not how the market has evolved. And the other thing is, and I'm going to pick on Microsoft a little bit here, but I've known many of the developers over the years and the way they sort of put people together. Microsoft is very focused on their primary core products, the server product, the workstation product, the Office product, and of course, in the last 10 years, the evolution of the cloud, which is how those technologies I just mentioned fit into Office 365, now Microsoft 365, and the Azure capabilities. And so what you see is they sort of have A, B, and C teams, and the A teams are getting sort of the really cutting edge stuff in the cloud. The B teams now are sort of managing a lot of the secondary Office installable products and things like SQL and stuff like that. And then the C teams get sort of the tertiary products, right? So they get sort of like SCCM maintenance and building out Intune and analytics things that are built off of like just simple charts and graphs and stuff. And people go, why does it take 5 years for them to come out with like 2 sort of basic features? Well, that's kind of the hint that I was given by some Microsoft people is those things just aren't really the focus. And they also know that they're competing with their partners, which they don't mind doing, but they also aren't going to work very hard at it because it's politically unpleasant for them. So I think that's kind of the big reason, but Intune would really have to be built from scratch to have a protocol that could perform and not be a huge burden on Microsoft's cloud. So they just have opted to kind of keep it in its own simpler swim lane. With that, I've got a second Venn diagram here, which I did for JumpCloud. And JumpCloud's actually similar but different. Again, really limited on the monitoring side, very much when they're doing sort of their device management, they've got a lot of limits, right? So it is a little bit closer to real time, and I do appreciate that. You can sort of launch a script with real ease on it. I'll show the scripts actually in a bit, but they are supposed to be simple scripts, which they call commands, and so you actually have to string scripts together with either an ampersand on the Microsoft side or a semicolon on the on Mac side, but real limited capabilities in terms of Linux. You can only install Mac software from the Mac software store, app store, which Bacon doesn't have any kind of limitations like that. And on Windows, you actually have to use Chocolatey, which is a third-party software management system. Which, if you have that, why would you want to use JumpCloud for that? It's kind of a bizarre choice. So, but again, it can do some software policies and software inventory and hardware inventory, and it's decent for rolling out Bacon. So again, we couldn't do that easily, but we were able to do it with a script, which I'll show you. So, these platforms, I think the obvious message here is that by themselves, they can be a little limited. And, with that, I think I'm going to switch over here and actually show these portals. And I just have to do my screen share here, so just give me a moment. Okay. Okay, and here we go. And I kind of wanted to show a few things. I'm going to get around to this JumpCloud portal. We're going to get around to showing Intune, also known as Endpoint Manager. This is Azure AD, and this is what a single sign-on portal looks like for those of you who don't use it. It's a real easy way to get to your apps and open them. Azure AD, this is TWE's, just real simple, straightforward directory, and nothing too secret up here on the screen. But we've got, users, groups of users, it does devices, so very similar to AD, but it's all in a simple web portal, and it's really got a lot of easy to use functions. I don't think it takes a terribly long amount of time to be able to use Azure AD. There is a free version of Azure AD too, so if you're using Office 365, it's included, and that's how all of the passwords and user accounts are managed. But if you do need to do more sophisticated things like a hybrid environment that is two-way, so if you want to be able to have people have a nice password reset portal in the cloud and have it reflect in the on-premise Active Directory, you'll need at least Azure AD Premium 1. We have Premium 2 here, but there's a lot of comparisons to all the features you get. There is a tremendous amount of security controls and sort of machine learning things that are going on in the background. That's probably some of the better stuff Microsoft has built in the past 5 years, and I would definitely say that Azure AD has become a really dominant platform. But it isn't, if you do need to buy those extra features, it's not as cheap as sort of a standard old Active Directory would be. You're going to pay, if you're buying independent accounts, about $6 a month per user. It gets a lot more affordable if you're using the other elements of Office and Microsoft 365, where they do a lot of combinations, but that definitely is in there. And then JumpCloud, maybe I'll just talk quickly about the fact that it does have authentication. So you do have sort of the SSO capabilities where you can have all of your standard web apps. It's got a pretty good list. It's got radius authentication, so you can set up radius and give it a public IP, and now your systems can get to that, and you can control sort of access to that and do radius as if you were hosting your own radius server, but it's up in JumpCloud. And it does have LDAP capabilities as well. So if you do need to maintain LDAP, it doesn't have to be on a separate system like you do with Azure AD and Active Directory. It can all manage it as one sort of centralized basis in here. And I do really like that. Maybe I'll just stay on this for a second, but one of the things we did in sort of preparation for this little work session was just kind of talk about if you're using something like JumpCloud and you did want to use these basic functions in their device management to roll out something like Bacon, it's going to be hard to do because the software is only for Windows and Apple, and then even when you do use Windows, you're going to need to know about Chocolatey, as I mentioned, which is again a whole other system you have to manage. So if you're going to do this, you're actually better off installing Bacon through a script, and that's what they call commands in here. And just to kind of show you what these look like, this is the Windows script that installs Bacon for our environment. And essentially what it does is it reaches out to the cloud and it grabs our installer and our installer script, it pulls them down and it runs those. And to get this to work, I had to put ampersands in between all of my commands so that it looks like one big long command. Otherwise, it won't run. It'll just run the first command, and then all the additional lines won't run. So that was kind of an adaptation that we had to make, but it did work. I actually had asked their support about it, and they're like, oh, you can't do that. You can only do one command at a time, and stringing together seems to work fine. So I let them know I was doing that, and they seemed to think that was kind of cool. similarly in Mac, this bash shell script will install bacon. Again, I had to have a place in the cloud to put it and then run a curl command, but pretty straightforward and something we could easily show to anybody. And these same scripts, by the way, work in Intune, although Intune is a little bit better on the file installs. You do have to build an Intune package. It's a little bit cumbersome, but it is doable. So you have some choices there. And I'll just maybe show you quickly what that looks like before we kind of talk about how bacon fits into all of this. So essentially, when you come over here into Intune, which is now called Endpoint Manager, you can see that it will list all the devices that are listed in there. You can roll out apps. You can do a lot of endpoint security in here if you're using Microsoft security products. Those aren't my favorite, but some people really like them. It's got a list of all the users and everything that is associated with your Azure AD tenant. Now with this, there is a whole capability in here around running scripts and installing applications. So, I think I put the Mac one up in here. And once again, this shell script is in here. They do make you upload it as a file, so you can't review it like you can in JumpCloud. So I think that that's a kind of a benefit there. And you don't actually get to say install the script. You have to put it in there and wait for the policy to kick off, which can be anywhere from 60 minutes to 2 days, has been our findings on managing lots and lots of environments for Microsoft, not just our own. So just be aware of that it can be a little bit of a delay. If you're not using Intune to do very much and you get a new computer that gets installed in Azure AD automatically when someone logs into their new computer for the first time, then you can also set it to automatically install Intune, and then Intune can have its default profile include the installation of Bacon. And Bacon has a whole policy system called profiles, which again can automatically, when a new machine is added, roll out all of your applications, all of your settings, down to any detail you can think of. If you want to set a corporate background picture, change the name, add printers, anything you can think of, it's going to have a lot of automation capabilities that are really going to outdo any of these sort of simple MDM tools. And so I think with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to kind of show you the rest of that mission here. So, again, just to recap, Azure AD and Intune together, pretty decent system. We do have some people that just use Intune to roll out Bacon, so they've only got about 5 licenses. They roll it out, and then they take that license away from that user and apply it to the next new person that they hire. But in general, there are some good uses for that as well, particularly if you're going to manage phones and things like that. But with that said, I kind of want to show you what it's like once you do get Bacon, and then I want Dave to give a little sense for all of the things Bacon can do. So maybe that's what we'll do here, Dave. We'll stop sharing here and change you to being the presenter.
Get my screen shared up now. Give me a second.
Fantastic. So Dave's gonna show us essentially what happens when the handoff occurs. So just assume Intune is installed Bacon on a machine, and from there it just kind of takes over if you want it to. And so Dave, take it away.
Sure. So yeah, just to set the baseline here. So we have Intune running on the endpoint. It's already installed Bacon. So the way we're able to manage this is we're able to create dynamic groups within Bacon. And those groups can contain members based on a certain kind of classification. So if we take a look here, I have a group called TWE endpoints. And this group is going to dynamically find all of the endpoints that have a host name matching this filter here. So in this case, we have our TWE AZDA W10. So anytime a machine comes on with this host name beginning, this prefix here, it will then be added to this group. What that allows us to do is to deploy a profile. And a profile is a collection of states. and we can deploy it to that group. And then all of these states will kick off on that endpoint. So here we see we have certain things like set company wallpaper. So we upload the wallpaper into Bacon, and then it'll push it onto that machine. And this one actually uses LGPO. So we can use GPOs to set that wallpaper. After we've placed it on the machine, and here I'm just using the default wallpaper location in Windows. We can also do things like, creating a temp folder. This is where we store most of our installers and logs. And then we can do things like disable USB storage. So this one here actually uses registry keys to disable USB storage, and it's one of the few methods that acts immediately as opposed to the GPO variant, which would require a reboot before it's actually active. Moving forward, we also have the ability to install software. Again, very similar to the company wallpaper, actually. We upload the software into Bacon, and then we can push it out and then run an install command here. I'm just using MSI exec. And then this actually checks to see if Chrome is already on the computer. So if it is, this actually doesn't kick off. So it'll only install Chrome if it's not installed already.
I mean, a couple of things you said, Dave, that I think are so cool about Bacon is, one, those groups, those dynamic groups, right? They can automatically add new machines based on virtually any criteria. How long it's been online, what its naming convention is, partial naming, IP scheme. So if it's, put on some a registration network, 192.168.5.x, right? And then it'll work within that. And then once you have that group, which automatically gets this machine added to it, it's going to take all these actions, and they could be any actions, right? Changing registry keys, GPOs, installing whatever apps are key. And these apps can be complex apps with multi-files and templates and things like that, or they can just be simple installers and you can do it all silently. Just a lot of functionality there. And even the ability to refresh. And I think, one of the things, there's a lot of little tricks in here, right, that are so interesting. Like when you showed Google Chrome, it shows the location where Google Chrome will end up. And I think what's so brilliant about that is if you want to install Google Chrome, right, on a machine, it will check to see if you already have that specific version in that specific location, so it doesn't waste its time if it's already done, right? And it can continue to check on that in a time frame that you set, or not check on it in the future if you don't want that. So I feel like that's one of the greatest things about profiles is the ability to sort of automate kind of anything.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. On that note, when it comes to automation, these profiles are able to be configured to check for the configuration of the machine every X seconds. So here we have 3,600 seconds, 1 hour. And so every hour, Bacon will go through those endpoints, inside TWE endpoints, this group, and check to make sure all of these states are being applied. So not only do you get to set your configuration, you can also verify that configuration is in place. And on top of that, you can also get into alerting, which will tell you if it had to reapply. So in the case of something like disable USB storage or the inactivity lock, if for some reason that machine's configuration changes and this profile finds it to be the case and fixes it, then you can also get reporting back to you, an email or output to syslog for your syslog server, right? And that lets you verify and audit those configurations that you've set. And that's something that's kind of a bit of a game changer for coming from a traditional, let's say, GPO environment.
Awesome. Well, I think with that, it kind of shows the process, right, of how we go through that. Maybe just give people a sense, maybe starting with the quick overview and then maybe monitoring, showing how they can see those profile alerts come in. We've just got a few minutes left, but I figure at least we'll give people the tour who maybe haven't seen Bacon before.
Yeah, for sure. So this is our overview page. This gives you a brief glimpse into what Bacon is tracking for you. So here we have alerts. These are custom configurable. In this case, we can see we have one here triggered by AV not running on our endpoints. You can also do profiles. This is purple here. And that's what I was talking about before, where you can have certain profiles, those configurations you set. We can check to make sure that they're actually still active. And if not, figure out which endpoints and when that occurred. Next up, we have an online-offline indicator. So this shows you what's connected to Bacon. We have a list of distributions in your environment. That's by operating system. So, Windows, Mac OS, as well as various flavors of Linux that you'd find in the enterprise. We have patches, so you can see how many packages or patches are available in Bacon to deploy to your endpoints. We have antivirus protection. So this lets you see what endpoints are actually running the AV service, not just have it installed, but actively running it. And that's something that you can define on your own. So if you have a split environment or you just got a new product, you don't have to wait for Bacon to update it. You can just go in there, set your AV service, and then it'll start reporting this way. And then lastly, here we have encrypted hard drives. So that shows you if your endpoints are using their OS native encryption. So, in the case of Windows, it would be BitLocker is your go-to versus something like Linux where there's like 7 different kinds of encryption that we're looking for here. Moving forward, so just for a quick overview here, so we have our monitoring. This sort of can set our custom rules and of course see the alerts. And if you have any kind of knock dashboards in your office, we're able to keep a constantly scrolling indicator here of which endpoints we have in the environment and if they are in need of attention. And these are all things that you can also drill down into. So with a simple click, you can then go to that endpoint and start working on it or view its stats as need be. So here we have different panels for disk information, network information, of course, software and other services, as well as patching. If you have any available to you, you'll see the patches there. So that kind of brings us to our endpoint page here. So just for this demo, I've filtered to Windows. This shows you the endpoints we have in Bacon, along with various data points we're pulling back. So you can see like host name and serial number, that kind of stuff, as well as going into the endpoint. And we also have the ability to remote to the endpoint as well. Just a couple clicks here.
And that's all just HTML5 too. There's no agent required on your local computer. It's all in the Bacon system. So you can not just see what's going on with your computers, but you can actually get to them and deal with them at the shell or through the file system or on the screen, which is really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, shell's usually my go-to just because it's so easy to do and have to bother the user. So that's always my preferred method of doing things. And then, yeah, the file system, you can use it. Oh, yeah, for sure. Again, I do love my shell, as well as the file system here, which lets you upload files, download files. So you can also upload scripts and then execute them in the shell, right? And you're running a system too, so you don't have to worry about any kind of permission issues or authentication there. So outside of that, we can go to our reporting into things. So we're able to see what software we have installed on the endpoint, not only just the name of software, but also the version. So that's very helpful for upgrading and deploying software. So you can actually see the endpoints that have that software when you drill down into it, as well as the same kind of interface for services. So you're able to see which ones have, let's say, Windows Print Spooler on them. And then when you drill down here, you can also select if you'd like to start or stop it, right? Or even mark as antivirus, so that thing we were talking about earlier where you define your services. Bacon has the ability to patch endpoints as well. That's through pretty simple interaction yet again. We can select our endpoints here and then deploy with various methods right away, with a time frame or when next connected, as well as relentless mode. So this allows you to install patches and reboot as much as necessary within a given time frame. So that's very useful for catching up if you've got servers or even workstations that have fallen behind. Bacon will keep going until either the time exceeds or you're out of patches.
Yeah, and you can set that right during a particular time window. So if you have an approved 2 hours on the weekend or something, you can set it exactly to down to the second of exactly what you want, which is really cool.
Exactly, yeah. Next up here, we have files, which I spoke about earlier. So here's where you could upload files to either push out through profiles or individually, you can push these out to endpoints and deploy them this way. But we also have bundles. So bundles are a collection of files, and this collection of files allows us to specify a launcher. So we can put all these files on an endpoint and then select which one to execute. So this handles the multi-file installers, which has always been kind of difficult. So we get the files on there, we can include a simple script, or if your installer is aware of just the files in the folder, you can just execute the installer, and then deploy this similarly to how you would deploy the single file to a group of endpoints that way. Just to keep in mind, though, this is a file dropper, so you can use this to do things like update font files, or if you have specific license files, you can use an environmental variable and then push that to all the endpoints in that specific location for each user, and just send it out that way.
Yeah, this tool is probably, the repository is probably one of the easiest. It's taken something that in old tools like SACM takes some coding knowledge and a lot of troubleshooting and testing and made it something where you can make a complex bundle of, say, 3 files like this in 20 seconds, right? So easy to put a bundle together, and then a couple quick clicks and you can deploy it to one, many, or all of your endpoints and get huge amounts of feedback in the logs, right? And I think that's one of the keys. We already talked about profiles, I know, but I think in all of these features, the ability to see sort of a really detailed log that shows you the success or failure. This is a great one right here, right? This is a successful provisioning, and you can see every step along the way, whether it succeeds or fails. And that way you'll know if you get stuck somewhere exactly what you need to do to fix it. These logs are gathered off endpoints. So it's pretty great stuff. I know there's a lot more features we'd love to get to today, but we want to make sure we have time to wrap up here. I think maybe, Dave, just show the administration page real quick. Just wanted to give people some sense that we can do sys logging out of here. So our full system logs and job logs can be pushed out to your SIM or log aggregator. We've got easy ways to restart all the Bacon services in here. You can put this, you can get Bacon in the cloud, or you can get it self-hosted, which is the default setting. It runs as a bunch of really cool, simple Docker containers, and so it's easy to update and change. You can put SMTP in there so you can get monitoring alerts and all that kind of good stuff. And then we've got role-based access control as well, which we've seen a lot of our larger customers use because they really need to make sure that certain people can only do certain things and only against certain groups of machines. A lot of flexibility in there, but just want to make sure that it was possible for everybody to get exactly the permissioning that they need, since Bacon is a very powerful real-time tool. So Dave, thanks for showing that off and for building a lot of the configs to be able to do our automated rollout of workstations. We do use this actively, and we've had over the last year about 15 of our customers kind of follow in our footsteps of using the Intune rollout and then using Bacon to sort of automatically build and self-assemble systems. And then a lot of other people use it to maintain those systems and keep them exactly in the state that they want them in over the long term. So if you have any interest in meeting with us and seeing a demo that's more specific to your needs, we'd certainly love to do that. And TWE is certainly excited also to show you any of the other platforms we talked about today. So from the identity side, Azure AD, JumpCloud, and Okta. From the MDM side, JumpCloud and Intune, and sort of all of the things that go along with that. So thanks everybody so much for joining the webinar today. Couple of quick things. We would love it if you'd fill out the survey when we end the webinar here. And also we have a raffle. So we are giving away Oculus 2, which is a super awesome wireless VR headset. I have one. I play virtual table tennis in there called 11 Table Tennis. I highly recommend it. It's super fun. Emily, do you want to let us know who has won the raffle?
Hi all. Yes, John. So the winner of the raffle is, drum roll, Francis N.
So Francis, congratulations. Maybe I'll see you online playing table tennis with your new Oculus. Please enjoy. Make sure you get us your contact info. I think if we send it to Francis N, it could end up at any address in America. So let's make sure we get all that stuff. And with that, I don't think there are any other items to wrap up on. Marla or Dave, do you have anything else?
Nothing for me.
Well, all right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar now. And thank you everyone so much, and look forward to hearing your feedback. It means a lot to us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.